Some people think that we're way past the Walt Disney days. Today people get married, they get divorced. Hang on. Glad you tuned in again. Good to see you. You probably know lots and lots of people who are married once and are divorced and maybe remarried, or never married but living together forever. There are all kinds of permutations of a relationship. But in terms of some of the challenge that people have today is they do live that Walt Disney world. They think, I'll get married, I'll have a house and a car and children and everything will be wonderful. Then life sets in. So we're going to talk about Divorce 101 today with two experts in the region. Gail Belshore is a financial advocate for people and someone who helps walk them through the divorce stages. And Jamie Almost is a St. Catharines divorce lawyer who never stops working. One thing I want to open with, folks, is this notion of divorce as a primer. Jamie, when a couple think that their time is over, or one person thinks the time is over, what should they do? What's the first thing they should do?
Well, I think both of them have to agree that it's over. The problem we often have is that one person thinks it's over and the other one doesn't think it's over. So there's different routes in which people separate. Sometimes you separate in the back of a police cruiser. You hope it's not going to be that way. If it's genuinely over, and we don't want situations where people have a fight on a Friday night, and it doesn't have to be a full-blown fisticuff fight. I'm talking about they have a disagreement. We don't want them in their lawyer's office on Monday morning saying, how fast can I get a divorce? There has to be some common sense here, and frankly, my problem has rarely ever been that people are in my office too early. They're often in my office getting information about what their rights and frankly what their obligations are after it's already occurred. The seismic event has already occurred. And when that happens, it's up to the lawyers, unfortunately, to put pieces back together again rather than plan for an event. So, but I'm a firm believer that people need to be well informed. And they need to be well informed not through anecdotal evidence of talking to friends and family who have been through it. It might be good to talk to friends and family about getting recommendations about who to talk to, who might have a good reputation in the community to do these things. But I don't think you need to draw upon somebody else's example of what went on unique to their separation and say that all cases are going to be treated like that.
Gail, let me put the same question to you. If you come across a couple that is about to break up genuinely, what's the first thing they should do?
Most of the people coming to me are referred from counselors, therapists, so they've gone through marriage counseling and have made that decision that they are going to separate. I then talk to them about what their options are in terms of how they can proceed. If they've done any research, look at the information that they have, make sure that it's accurate, potentially connect them with individuals in the professional law field, and assist them in getting some clarity about what it is they would like to do around, specifically for me, the financial issues.
Do you find that even before they come to you, they've talked to all their friends and colleagues and they got as Jamie's suggestion, they got all this advice about the finances?
No, in most cases they're a little clueless. It's been one of those cases where he said or she said it's over and they've agreed it's over, and they're now a little bit like deer in the headlights of what next. And they're a little lost about what they can do. I have had a few where I'm working with an individual, and in that case they have spoken with family and friends and have a bit of misinformation.
Jamie, with the number of divorces that you're engaged with as the lawyer, help us understand the texture of the conversation when they first come to you. Are some people timid? Are some people ferociously angry, confused?
Well, people are complex, and so are their emotional responses. Some people are, it depends. If you are the person who is learning that there is going to be a separation and you didn't want a separation, the range of emotions that they may be experiencing are sometimes radically different than the person who is on the other side of it, who's saying, I wish to separate. Often I think there's a certain degree of the issue of control. I mean, who's in control of the situation. But it's a very trying time for everyone. Frankly, it's the most trying for the children. I mean, they get caught in the middle. They're the ones with the least amount of control, and that's the sad part. Is that while legislation has changed over the years, and the way court cases come and go, and precedents are set, and it's up to the legal community to interpret them and carry those cases forward. While all of those changes take place year after year, constantly, the law is organic, it's always changing. One thing that's always common is the tremendous negative effect that a poorly run separation can have on probably the most important thing that any parent, any party to a proceeding would say exists, and that's their children.
Is it your view, perhaps even in your own experience, that sometimes the one of the people in the relationship uses the children as, I am the owner of the child?
Well, I mean, I do think there's a certain amount of control, and I think people do get desperate. But I'll try to approach it from the most positive approach I can. I will accept that when people separate, that they have genuinely different views about what is in the children's best interests. I may have my own private suspicions that a person is doing something because they're motivated by money or control or spite or whatever else. Often I think it's fear. I think it's fear. That they fear that they don't know what the future holds, and they're concerned that they will lose the most important thing in their lives.
It's an important point. Let's go to the issue of fear, Gail. Do you see fear in your clients?
Absolutely. Fear of the unknown, whether it be the process, the outcome, their emotions taking control, and just not knowing what to do and what's best, and fear of making a mistake and doing something wrong.
Do you find sometimes that one of the parties hides money?
I haven't seen that in the cases that I've dealt with. However, I have one that might have a bit of that element to it. But their full financial disclosure is a big piece of the first steps into the process. And it's pretty clear what documents need to be produced to provide the full financial disclosure. And individuals that are meeting with their independent legal advisors, who I'm also meeting with, it's made clear to them that they need to disclose all of their financial information. And that documentation is looked at from a number of professionals from their perspective to make sure that it's all provided. And if something doesn't seem quite right, then it's questioned and further supporting documentation may be asked for.
Let me put this idea to you. We make the assumption sometime that the people that you work with or the people that you work with, they're all reasonable, rational people. And sometimes they're not, right?
Well, they might be very rational. It's the process makes people, you're dealing with an emotional subject. So the topic is emotional. It's not often rational. And you're dealing with it at a time when it's often crisis. So it doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me at all that people may not act in a family court proceeding the way that we expect them to act outside of, well, even within that proceeding. People react to stress differently. So, I mean, I will give people the benefit of the doubt that maybe in time, if a case is handled properly, that people aren't pushed to make more and more, we'll say, ridiculous emotional decisions, and will sit back and make more rational decisions. But unfortunately, the judicial system, or maybe fortunately, there's a time frame involved, and things need to be done within a certain time frame. Or you need to essentially beg the court to, if it goes to court, and we don't recommend every case go to court, but there are time frames to get things done. The courts can't be babysitters and babysit a family from now till the children graduate from university or college, there needs to be an end. It's in everybody's interest to bring it to an end. But sometimes there's a conflict there between needing to make things happen on a quick time frame, and at the same time giving people the right time to essentially, I'm going to say, grieve of the separation. Now, other people are very happy. They're separated, and it's the, Hallmark cards, I suppose, could produce a greeting card for "I'm divorced," and both of them would go to the same divorce party. I mean, it's possible, but it's rare.
Gail, Jamie's suggesting that it's the system that makes people appear somewhat irrational. In the people that you see, you've got to see some people who simply don't understand the money they have or don't have.
The knowledge about the family finances often has been looked and dealt with by one of the parties. And so if I'm working with the two, that makes it a little easier because we can delve into what the family has. When I'm working with one, if they don't have the information and they have trouble finding it, then I'm doing a lot more hand-holding. And sometimes the step of just finding the information for the financial statement that needs to be filled out is overwhelming for people. They'll come to me and say, this is what I was given, this is what I'm supposed to do, I've had a consult with a lawyer, or he's told me I need to fill this out, or she's told me. Usually it's the female who isn't familiar with the family finances, and they just feel totally overwhelmed. And their emotional situation makes it more difficult for them to start that process.
You know, I've seen and heard about cases, divorce cases. Some seem fairly straightforward and reasonable from all aspects, and others have so much anger and fears of deceit. Is it part of your job as a lawyer to chip away at some of that stuff?
Well, I mean, I think it's a lawyer's obligation, and I think, frankly, it's part of the code that we have to abide by as being lawyers, is don't stoke a fire, don't promote, don't antagonize. But the facts, I mean, maybe the facts are what they are, and people just have to accept that it is what it is. But, I mean, we talk about the horror stories because those are the ones worth talking about. I mean, there are literally thousands of cases that make it through the judicial system in Niagara, and this is going on across the country. We talk about a handful of them. Some of them make it on the front page of the paper because there's so much acrimony. But there's a lot of also success stories there too. So we have to keep it in balance.
Update us, Jamie, in terms of the divorce law. Have we seen changes in the past 5 years? Anything that's been notable?
Well, the law is always changing and depends on the province you're in. I think probably the most important change that I've seen over the last just slightly more than a decade has been there's renewed or more and more emphasis on bringing people together and finding alternative avenues to resolve their conflicts. It does not have to be done strictly by court pleadings alone, and whoever writes the best pleadings, the best statement of claim or application as we refer to them now, that they're going to carry the day. I think there's a recognition that family law is unique. It's not Air Canada versus Petro-Canada arguing over fuel and whether or not someone's getting, what someone's abiding by a contract. This is mom and dad, or this is grandparents and grandchildren involved. We're talking about a different clientele, and the judicial system appears to be recognizing that we need to maybe handle these cases a little bit differently, or frankly, I'm going to suggest a lot differently. Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin will release a report very soon, although information's starting to come out about what that report says, and it's clear that there is going to be, or the recommendation is, let's move more and more towards a mediated response to a separation. Now that's fine. I mean, you can put that on paper, but you have to have the resources to back it up. You can't just simply say it. It has to be there. People have to see that there's a realistic opportunity to mediate.
Do you do mediation?
Sometimes I think that, if you're handling your law practice, I think, properly, there's mediation involved in every file. And I think there's a certain misunderstanding out there that people believe that if you go to a lawyer, that there's a file is not going to be mediated, that it's just simply going to be a battle. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Do I hold myself out to be a mediator per se? No, I don't. I think there's a special talent. Could I mediate? I don't know. I mean, I suppose I could. In a professional way, we're all mediating. Every family lawyer I know, at some point in every file, has an element of mediation. But I think what perhaps you're asking is am I actually holding myself out as a mediator where the parties come together with me and try to? And the answer is no. I have a very, very defined client. I represent that client's interests. However, representing my own client's interests does not necessarily mean that it is not in my own client's interest to be conciliatory on points. They have children. It's important that these people understand the lawyers come into their lives and they leave. These parties, having children, are partners for life. It doesn't go away just because the court file is closed with something we call final order.
And I think that's a key piece to mediation, is that when the agreement is discussed between the two parties with their family mediator, and they can come up with something that is acceptable to them, get the independent legal advice so their rights and obligations are known to them and understood by each of the two parties, they can craft something that they're happy to live out. It's not something imposed upon them in the same way as a win-lose kind of court case.
Gail, in your work, would you, in essence, represent one or both of the people?
When I work as a family mediator, I'm a neutral third party. I'm there to assist them in clarifying what it is they need, they want, where their fears and concerns are on the issues that they need to address, and helping them to get some clarity around that. Then from those meetings, I draft up a memorandum of understanding, which is not a legal document. And as part of the process, they've either connected themselves with independent lawyers, or I've assisted them to do that with individuals who have that kind of mindset that negotiation and mediation is a good element of family law. And those individuals meet with their family law representatives to get clarity. We come back, iron things out further, and that may be a few meetings depending on whether they have one issue to be resolved. Maybe they just have division of property.
I don't know why I feel this way, but you've both beautifully explained some of the process leading up to this end of marriage. But it still sounds kind of tough to understand. I feel like I need an advocate to tell me, do this, do that. And I think that's what you're both saying, but with your background in law, there is so much different types of relationships. You know, is it common law? Is it legally married? Is it same-sex partners? Yours is mediation plus the finances. I'm thinking of people, who they don't know what to do other than get angry.
Well, and the statistics are out there now that about 70 to 80% of parties are self-represented. They're trying to do it on their own.
Because they can't afford
professional
help?
I have to believe that, because when we see surveys and people are questioned, do you wish you have essentially they don't ask it in this way, do you wish you had a lawyer? But they want lawyers, but they can't afford them. Mm-hmm. And Ontario Legal Aid, they're like no other, they're just like any other organization. The reality is that the public sector can't afford all of the people who want to use the resources, and They're like other organizations. They have had budget cutbacks, but
So
I
you're
tell you,
saying-
they've seen a lot of cutbacks.
That person representing him or herself goes before a judge?
Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me of that television commercial where the doctor talks the patient through his own operation, and he's holding a butter knife to his chest,
Right.
and he's going to tell him how to do his own surgery. You know, this is the problem, is that in many respects, people are trying to do their own surgeries. And frankly, what happens is that usually once it hits crisis, that's when they're in the lawyer's office to try to fix the problem that was already created. If we're lucky, they arrive in our office when we can still correct it,
Where there's still communication.
Well, not even that, but just the idea that we haven't had a final order. Try and undo a final order where you've made a terrible mistake on a property issue or maybe a support issue. If you don't know the information, I'll be the first to admit, I don't know all of the law. And if any lawyer out there tells you they know all of the law, I don't believe them. I think we are all, at some point in time, this is the day and age of the specialist. You get to know a certain area, a certain field. And I can honestly say, I do not know all of the law. I know where to go and find the answers. I've got real concerns when 70 and 80% of the population out there are trying to do this on their own when the legal representatives themselves may not know all of the answers. But I'm fairly confident I know more than what a person who didn't go to law school knows.
Someone who represents him or herself
On that issue, by the way.
might even think they can do as good a job as a professional lawyer, but what I worry about is the children could be lost so easily in that kind of discussion.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, if someone is representing themselves because they had no choice, that's one thing. If someone is representing themselves because they have concluded that they're going to represent themselves like something they've seen out of Hollywood, and they don't need to go to law school, and they don't need to get the recommendations from a lawyer, that concerns me. Now, there are lots of places, fortunately. I sounded like I was hard on Ontario Legal Aid. The reality is there are other resources. There's the Family Law Information Centers, which are at the courthouses in both St. Catharines and Welland. People should avail themselves of this. There's free legal information out there. Now, admittedly, you're not getting a lawyer appointed to you to handle your case, but every little bit of information that you can get that's accurate information can help you. In the same facilities, they have mediation services available, the Center for Family Mediation. These are all opportunities to get educated, and in many cases, the best education that you can receive at these places is that there are alternatives than to go in front of a judge and argue in front of a judge. Many people, I have people who are close to me in my own family that ask the question, why would anyone have a judge who really doesn't know your family and know your children? Why would you put yourself at that risk of having someone who doesn't know the unique aspects of your family? Why would you risk that in having a judge make that decision? You're the parents, you know your children best. Find a solution before the judge has to do it.
Gail, if you recall, I'd like you to say the story of the couple that you had a while back where the husband, who was very generous, wanted to give his wife the car. Could you just tell that story? I think it's an important story.
So this is an example of a kitchen table negotiation. He presented an offer, and I'll just use some easy to remember numbers. Both parties were going to get $100,000. She was going to get what she wanted most, which was the family home. She would keep the van, she would keep her RSP. He would keep his pension, he would take all of the debt, the lines of credit, and he would take the mutual fund account and his RSP. When I looked at that as a financial outcome going forward, so on paper right now looks quite nice from his presentation to her, she ended up being what I refer to as asset rich and cash poor because she kept the family home. That often is an emotional decision. It's one made from a stability and mother perspective, wanting to keep everything intact for the children. When we did a counter offer, we made a few changes, one to bring things more in line with family law around child support and spousal support, and rolled over some of the liquid assets from his side of the column, so to speak, to her side. The change in his financial outcome with the second scenario was hardly noticeable in comparison to what it did for her to have the home, but to have some cash to be able to be living on.
Because if I have the home, my roof is going to go, I might need it to be painted, there might be damage to windows.
There's that, but you also have to put groceries on the table.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have a balance, and sometimes the emotions don't make you the best financial decisions. And that is something that I provide people with, of a look of what a scenario might look like. And as long as it fits within the family law and equalization and spousal support and child support, we can look at it as an option. They then have the opportunity to discuss that further with their independent legal advice.
Jamie, we've only got about a minute and a half left. If you could, I'd like to ask you in 1 or 2 sentences on each side.
You don't know me then.
That's why I'm prefacing this.
Then you do know me. Yeah.
What's the legal definition between being married with a license and living together?
The definition. I mean, what the consequences are.
Yes.
The most important consequence, when it comes to support, generally speaking, there would be no real differences between the two of those. It's primarily property. We treat people radically different if you are married versus in a common law union. And a lot of people think that they're treated one and the same. They're not. Now, having said that, I'm seeing on the news of recent that British Columbia has just started. I gather they've just started treating married and common law partners in a very similar manner. And in fact, my understanding is they did what's called grandfathering. They grandfathered it in. And so people who were already in those unions have now been told that after 2 years, this is my understanding, this is British Columbia only, it's very important to understand, this is not Ontario experience, it's not what the Ontario law says. This is something that the legislature in BC has done. They're recognizing how many unions are now common law, and I'll suggest to you, big problems that can occur when people believe that they're being treated the same and they're not.
Right. We've got to wrap up. Jamie, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
My office telephone number, 905-687-8200. Website, www.